Hi, my lovely mates and my respected teacher. My presentation today is about critical sociolinguistics, approaches to language and power. My partner has previously discussed the language of the media, and the studies we've covered so far in this chapter make assumptions that powerful languages are always accepted and received by the audience, which is not always the case, since we have something called resistance to the powerful languages. This will be the main topic of my presentation, and in this section of this chapter I will discuss James Scott's on-stage, off-stage behavior, political correctness, anti-languages, language and gender, sexism and resistance, symbolic domination, and unifying a linguistic market. So I will start with the first one, James Scott's on-stage, off-stage behavior. Let me give you a quick historical background. Long ago, before mechanization, peasant labor was needed and desired to look after the rich farming. For this reason, the rich respected and awarded them. Soon after mechanization was introduced, the peasants' labor became devaluated. Then came the linguistic change as means for the peasant to express opposition and resistance. So I'll discuss how these peasants, in this case study, used their language as means of resistance. The study of peasants and landowners in Siddhartha. This is the study that James Scott conducted. So the resistance I told you about was practiced through the two personalities that these peasants took over. They are the on-stage behavior and the off-stage behavior. The first one, the on-stage behavior, the linguistic choices they adopted in the presence of the landowners and the elites. This behavior was characterized by the high censorship and use of respectful nicknames such as Haji, implying the holiness of the one who has made a pilgrimage to Mecca, and the use of euphemisms close to the language used by the rich. So when the peasants were in the presence of their landlords or the landowners, they used a different language for the one they use in private. They used a language more respectful, they used nicknames, and they used euphemism. But their off-stage behavior, this is the free language the peasants used among each other in the absence of their landlords. It is free from censorship and stripped from any nicknames. And when they use nicknames, they replace them with offensive ones, such as Sati, which is a non-Muslim moneylender associated with usury. So the way they used a different language or adopted a different behavior in the absence of their landowners, this was regarded as means of resistance because they are not living the reality they are performing in front of the landowners. The peasants' use of naming provides an evidence to Voloshinov's view of the sign as an arena of class struggle. So Voloshinov has the view or the concept that says that a sign can be used as to reflect class struggle. Sign, which is the language, the use of words or the lexicon, the behavior, the tone. This way, the way someone uses language can express the class struggle. And a class struggle, as defined by Oxford Dictionary, is the conflict of interests between the workers and the ruling class in a capitalist society. Now we move to the idea or the concept of political correctness. So it is the term used to describe language, policies, or measures that are intended to avoid offensive or disadvantage to members of particular groups in a society. And to use a more simple definition of political correctness, it is how the political status of the masters put pressure on them to make the linguistic choices which are correct for them to keep their face. A case study that Franklin Southworth provides. So his example is from a field study he conducted in South Indian villages, and he concentrated on the use of the term used to refer to former outcasts in Tamil Nadu. The term that was used to describe this group of untouchables is Parian, and the more modern and acceptable one is Harijan. The latter was introduced by Gandhi to mean God's people. This change in terminology was part of the Reformation movement, which aimed to improve the status of the untouchables. The untouchability is the practice of ostracizing a minority group by segregating them from the mainstream by social custom or legal mandate. The case study. An interview was conducted with an ex-president of the town where he used the modern term, the more appropriate one, Harijan, to refer to this group of people, but was interrupted by his wife referring to them as Parian. The euphemistic use of the language practiced by the ex-president proves how the Reformation resistant movement succeeded to put pressure on him to use their terminology. This means the pressure his political status puts upon him and his need to maintain a good reputation, while his wife didn't need to do that. So she used the term or the expression she's accustomed to, which is somehow offensive, while he intended to use the modern term to show respect to this group of people, to serve his goals in saving his face or maintaining his political status or reputation. Now we'll move to anti-languages. An anti-language, it is the language used by an anti-society. This term was coined by Halliday to refer to a group of people who reveal their oppositional status to a dominant society by several means, including their use of language. The anti-society is in opposition with the ruling authority, and they are overtly oppositional. And the principal means of their opposition is their use of language. So he pointed out three main characteristics of anti-languages: relexicalization, over-lexicalization, and inversion. We'll start with the first characteristic of anti-languages, relexicalization. It is the replacement of old words for new ones in anti-language. An example is the lexicon called pelting speech, used by criminals in the Elizabethan England, where they changed the meaning of certain words, such as lift to mean one who steals a package, and market to mean one to whom a package is handed. It's because these criminals depended on theft as a principal means of living. The second characteristic is over-lexicalization. It is the creation and use of many words or lexical items for a single entity or concept. An underworld language in Calcutta, for example, contains 21 words for bomb. And the last characteristic is inversion. This includes the inversion or exchange of elements within words as a metaphor for the inversion of the world. So this is why they use the inversion, to reflect the inversion of the world itself, and as a response to the repressive apparatus. The Calcutta underworld anti-language, for example, replaces the word Kodan for Dokan, showing exchange of consonants, and Karka for Kakar, showing syllable inversion. This is done for the effect of verbal display, humor, and rebellion. Now we will see how critical sociolinguistics dealt with language and gender. Critical sociolinguistics shed light on this issue as a form of resistance and opposition to the power and dominance of men over language. And as other movements of resistance, the feminist movement applied their own changes on language in order to serve their goals and eliminate inequality or bias towards males. So what they did is that they replaced expressions that adopted the traditional way of using man to refer to both sexes with more appropriate expressions. For example, they replaced the expression man hour with work hour, because man is restricted with men and shouldn't represent both men and women. The expression work hour is neutral. Also, the expression manpower with workforce and the use of the word man to refer to both men and women. For example, man needs water to survive, with humans need water to survive. Now for symbolic domination. It is a term introduced by Bourdieu, who believes that every linguistic interaction takes place within a social structure. He also believes that the institution is what gives meaning to the utterance, because it is the social person who speaks, not the language itself. This means that what gives meaning to the words are the person who is speaking them. For example, what gives a meaning for a sentence like, I hereby sentence you to 6 months hard work in prison, for example, are both the word and the authority given to a judge. So there are some important terms that we have to know before we get to symbolic domination. We have communicative economy, which says that socialization is a system of linguistic exchanges. This means that our social practices, our everyday socialization with others, itself is like buying and selling in a market. It's like an economy in itself. A word is like a product, or an utterance itself is like a product. So it is a system of linguistic exchanges or transactions. We also have symbolic power, the assets that certain patterns of language form, which can receive different values depending on the market in which they are offered. This I will discuss with the last point that we have, which is symbolic domination. The process whereby the ruling class is able to impose its norms as the sole legitimate competence on the formal linguistic markets. So we have something called a linguistic market. It is the situation, the settings where this, for example, conversation is happening. And each setting or situation requires specific types of speech to be said. So this particular speech, which needs to be said in this particular situation, has a symbolic power. It is an asset. If you own or have the ability to speak this certain way in this certain position, then you have a power. You have a value. And the domination is practiced by an authority or the ruling class who impose their norms, and they govern this linguistic market. They set the rules, they set the correct social practices that people need to follow in order to have a good position in this linguistic market. So part of socialization involves learning how to produce expressions which are highly valued on the markets concerned. And the competences that have the most value are those that are most unequally distributed. This means when they are unequally distributed, they are like a rare product. And a rare product is always more valued than an ordinary product that is available everywhere. So the same goes to our linguistic markets. The domination leads the dominated to accept the authority and correctness of the dominating variety. It also leads to euphemism. People start applying self-censorship after assessing the market's condition accurately and producing linguistic expressions that are appropriate and suitably euphemized. Once one masters the rules of politeness and accommodates his language to the market, he subconsciously acknowledges the socio-political hierarchy, which is the case in the language of the peasants and Sadarka. What I mean by this is that people modify their language to suit the dominant, euphemized language of the rich, and in private, they share the same class habitus, which is like the way they talk, they walk, they act, and so on, since they share the same position in the social space. So these members of the dominated class cannot exercise the liberties of plain speaking in formal linguistic markets, that is, in front of their landlords or the rich. They are restrained and forced to use the language or the style they are not accustomed to. The last point I want to talk about is unifying a linguistic market. I have already discussed the meaning of a linguistic market. Now we will talk about unifying a linguistic market. Authority legitimates a standard language which all members of the society should use. The choice is made upon which language is to be or is to become dominant over the entire state. This is either to crush local characteristics and varieties, which was the case with the French language, since there were other varieties that were used for revolutionary purposes and caused a struggle over the symbolic power. So the government or the authority tried to unify a linguistic market, which is the French language, for all people to speak, so that no one could be revolutionary or different from others or opposing to the government. Or as a principal tool in the process of colonization, which was the case with English in Nigeria. That is when colonization associated English with military, technological, and educational superiority, so people tended to learn it in order to change their position in the social space and become more powerful. This means the symbolic power, not like powerful in authority and so on, because people who are more educated, more acknowledged with the technological power or technological superiority are superior to others. So that was everything for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, which I doubt. But in case you have any questions, you can ask me whatever you want on my social media accounts, and I'll be more than glad to answer you. Thank you for listening and watching.